All right, welcome back to part 2 of our list of the 12 poets we should be teaching in our classrooms or should be reading in the year 2022 if you're just a student of the world. Thank you for watching video number 1. If you haven't yet, you gotta jump back at some point to part 1. I guess there's no particular order or rhyme or reason to the list as far as number goes, but the quality of the poets in the first half is just as high as the quality of the poets I got for you in this video. So thank you for coming back or coming for the first time, and we will see who's up first at number 7, up seventh at number 7. That's how numbers work, English teacher. What do you want from me? And number 7 we have William Carlos Williams. Now he does appear in high schools across the world because of his poem Red Wheelbarrow glazed with the rainwater and the chicken and the plums, the one about the plums, and because of the really short poems. I really just hate the idea that our students' education of William Carlos Williams would end there. He has too much to offer. He is a pediatrician for 40 years while also being a poet, and I really like him not just for the quality of his writing, because he is an extremely empathetic writer, but that he's able to bring that empathy that he brings to the table as a writer to the topic of such domestic stuff. That's the word that often gets thrown around about his poems. Just stuff around the house, and not brings a different topic to the forefront. And I think there is a lot to do there when it comes to school. Now, where does he fit in a class that's analyzing him? Now that I don't really know. I don't really have a very strong suggestion for Williams and his poetry. There is the poem Dance Ruse, which is where I would start with him if your student's maturity level allows for a poem about a guy getting naked and looking at himself in the mirror. If that can fly in your classroom, then hey, let it fly. Being able to show the zeroing in on small stuff. Not that every poem has to be what are the deep symbols behind the wheelbarrow, and not everything has to be that all the time. It's one of the things I often hear from students, is that they hate that every poet is just kind of obfuscating the reality of what they're talking about. They're always trying to hide behind symbols and hidden meanings, and everything's always shifting around on them. I think students start to feel a mistrust towards poems, which I despise that. So William Carlos Williams can maybe be that person who restores faith in the young poetry readers by kind of losing all the guile and dropping that off and just really getting to the heart of caring about people. And to interrupt the list, if you're getting value from this video, I'd ask that you press that subscribe button. I mean, really, this is an opportunity for you. Right now, it's my mom, my wife, and my school email account all subscribe to this channel. That is pretty elite company you may want to join. You could be number 4, maybe 5 by the time you're watching this. Back to the list though. It's number 8, we have Lee Young Lee. Now, all these poets have interesting biographies. Sometimes their biographies are more important than others. And again, that's a fine line I think we got to walk in our classes between how much we end up talking about the people and how interesting they are. Like, how long do we spend talking about Terrence Hayes playing college basketball before, we just see him as a cool person and stuff, like this really profound thinker. I think it's a line we got to really consider. How much is getting their interest and how much is more just people watching. But Lee Young Lee is one of those people. So his father is the personal physician to Mao Zedong. His mom and dad are political exiles out of China. They moved to Indonesia, where he's born, and then he moves to America. He doesn't start writing until he attends college. His poems differ from a lot of other poets, especially in the American landscape of today, where a lot of times the intensity of a poem is one of the things you're left with. With Lee, it's intense emotions, but often you might describe his poems as almost being quiet, where other poets maybe are shouting at you or really feeling at you. Lee has a way of kind of almost uncurling something, unfolding something. A lot of poems about memory, a lot of poems about family, a lot of poems about, figuring out your position in relation to other people important to you in your life. A lot of things that I would think any high school student is able to relate to, not, that exact personal experience that Lee has with his family. But we see that in the poem I would suggest starting with Young Lee. That would be The Gift. Beautiful poem about his dad removing a splinter from his hand. I put him next to William Carlos Williams on purpose because they have that kind of similar vibe of being able to pick out that small thing. Lee's are a lot more personal. It's often clear that he's writing about himself. So it's different tactics, but with the same kind of MO of picking out the tiny moment and really being able to have us enter into it in an honest way. So Young Lee, one that I think is a strong comparison point also for other poets. If you want a drastically different voice in the room for that comparison work of how does this poet sound versus this poet, or how would you describe that poem versus that poem, if you're just trying to get those words generated from your students, he is a guy that offers a strong counterpoint. Also, you can pull in a thing that's very rare in our classes, unfortunately, the Chinese influence that he has. So the Chinese poets that influence his work, and leaning into the Asian literatures that are unfortunately, at least in my experience, absent from American curriculum. Still, he is a strong entry point because of the quality of his writing and the humanity of his writing, but also leads you into a potentially larger conversation. So number 8, we're at 8 now, Young Lee. And at number 9, we have another personal favorite of mine. He wrote my favorite poem, Those Winter Sundays. That is the great Robert Hayden at number 9. I think Those Winter Sundays does come up fairly often in high schools. So I think that is our entry point here for Robert Hayden, but interesting guy. He is kind of the historian on our list. He subscribes to the Baha'i religion. There's a strong chance I'm mispronouncing that. Try to get it right. The Baha'i religion, and that religion teaches, at least partially, a level of universality to the human experience. So he resists the idea of being kind of classified as a poet writing about race, but he still does write about race. He has a poem called The Middle Passage that is your step up from Those Winter Sundays. So you read the middle passage with your class, and I think you're able to look at a lot of things simultaneously. One of those things is, what do we call this work? Is it a historical account? Is it what's it trying to be? Is it trying to be a poem? Is it just trying to get you into the experience? I mean, a lot of problems of classification for Robert Hayden. He does have the more traditional poems, like Those Winter Sundays, which you just can kind of dive into in your typical way. But I think a strong lesson idea for Robert Hayden is his work is, what do we make of it? At what point does he stop trying to be historical fiction writer, put you into the position, and at what point does he become critic, and at what point does he become, this is also my experience that I'm living as a black man writing in America, and all these things all at once. A lot to it. Probably not the first poet I'm teaching in the year, just because I do think you have to have a lot of tools in the tool belt to really dive into Hayden's work, but I think he's someone that maybe fits in that same Gwendolyn Brooks mold of has one really, really popular and relatively easy poem to teach, and that is where we stop. So that is actually where we start in this class. Congratulations, and dive into that conversation, those conversations with Robert Hayden, our number 9 poet. And at number 10, we have Aimee Nezhukumatathil, a nature poet, if I can just start putting adjectives on people at this point in the video. But We like Aimee Nezhukumatathil for many reasons, but the first one I really want to pull her into my class is for the focus she puts on these. So her poems come in these big collections of poems, all about nature and writing about, observations of things in the living world, but always able to pull back into, I know it's gonna sound cliche as can be, but like these surprising truths, or oh, that's what that was really about. There's a lot of those moments, and you always know it's coming, but you still are pleasantly surprised by the depth of what's really going on in the thing that she's writing. So I also put her intentionally next to Robert Hayden. She has this amazing poem called Mosquitoes, about sharing the experience with her father of looking at the stars at night, and him being a night watcher, stargazer, and how she's super bored by it and not into it. And then, when she becomes a mom, then she has a son who is into it with his grandfather, so now she's suddenly into it. Very strong reverberations of Robert Hayden's Those Winter Sundays, not approaching from the same trauma lens that Robert Hayden has, and it's definitely a throwback to that poem, a call out to that poem. And I think that is a really strong idea for any of Nezhukumatathil's work, is how does she approach topic A in the same way that poet or writer or whoever approaches topic A, because she has such a consistent perspective on the natural world being kind of the route to getting to the point she's trying to make, or the observation that she has found valuable enough to write about. I like that a lot as a lesson idea, that we know how she operates. Now, how does she get to that same point that this person had to do through their own lived experience, or through, whatever various poetic means they took. I like that. So, her poems are maybe a little bit harder to find on the interwebs, but she has some YouTube videos, her reading other people's poems and different things. But you can find some stuff on her website, but all, again, linked in the description below. But you might just have to buy a book of poems. Oh no. Get your principals or whoever to buy you some poems. And at number 11, we have Lucille Clifton. Again, maybe I'm finding on this list, I'm putting people on here who offer something that a lot of other poets don't. But Lucille Clifton is one of those quality, non-quantity poems. I forget who says it, but someone describes her poems as being like little worlds that have a lot going on in them. She is also one of the poets who allows you to enter into the conversation on the body and the female body. Her most famous poem, I think, is Homage to My Hips, a poem about being a woman, which again, a conversation, I think, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm reading the room of, American high school classrooms, but there's not a lot of conversations, critical conversations about the body and the lived experience of being a human being in a body, and how we think about our bodies and all that type of stuff. And I think the really sparse poetry of Lucille Clifton allows for that. So rather than a poet who's going to go into a lot of detail and maybe push the class into a place of discomfort that they're not really able to recover from. I mean, that's just how teenagers are, like talking about people's bodies. They're like, even though it's a really valuable conversation, you don't want it to be shocking or like discomforting. Lucille Clifton is the avenue to get to those conversations. And at the same time, not to overdo the analysis of her poetry life, but the easy analysis is similar to Emily Dickinson of how does she write? Not having the capitalizations and the commas and the periods and all the punctuation just disappears off the page, and what does that allow her to do in those conversations about format? she's a really strong person to bring into a creative writing class for that very reason. What do you really not need? So if you got a lot of overwriters in the room, show them some Lucille Clifton and say, yeah, maybe you need like 1% of what you're writing right now, because she's able to do with 1% what a lot of people can't do with, you know, a lot more. Lucille Clifton, you gotta read her. What are we doing? How did we get to 11? How's she number 11? Oh, it's not an order by quality. It's all random. But you gotta. And number 12 on our list, we might as well end with a very powerful person. That would be the poet Natalie Diaz. She is an American Indian writer. That is not the only reason she's on the list, but let's be honest, we simply don't read enough Asian and American Indian writers, period. We probably don't read enough people of color, obviously, but I think those two groups specifically, they're virtually absent from a lot of the text gathering sites that we have, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So Natalie Diaz, professional basketball player in Europe, comes back to America, gets her MFA, and writes a brilliant book about her brother called When My Brother Was an Aztec. And her brother struggles with drug addiction, and basically losing his identity to drugs and being ripped from him. And the poem we're starting with for her, is the poem No More Cake Here, a poem that even in the jaded world of the 2022 classroom is a shocking read, and just the way that she's able to present drug addiction in the current cultural climate where that is such a topic of artistic conversation. So there's a lot of been there, done that. She presents it in a way that's very appropriately shocking. It's really something, you just have to read it for yourself. But I think it's one that really plays in a high school class, one that you read out loud. I think it's one that really generates a response pretty easily. So she is our final poet. And there's a lot more to the work, and just that ability to kind of be, no pretense, and just really pull in and out of ideas, and just very imaginative. It's a weird word to use to describe poetry, imaginative, but that's kind of what it is. Just things popping in and out of the poems. Very attention pulling your attention in various directions while you read. It's a pretty cool experience, and that's where I'm going if I'm teaching it. What is the experience of reading a Diaz poem? How is the narrator kind of pulling the strings of your reading experience? Is where I go with it. And that is number 12, Natalie Diaz. You got to read her. You got to read her, folks. All right, we end. That's our list. Did I leave off a bunch of people? Yes. Put into the comments, who did I miss? Amiri Baraka we missed. Danez Smith we missed. Sarah Kay we missed. Clint Smith we missed. We missed all the Smiths. We just missed a lot of people. Kathy Park Hong we missed. What am I thinking? Charles Wright we missed. We missed all the people. I said I would do 12, so I did 12. Maybe we need round 2. We'll hit 12 more, but the idea here is, can we enter into sustained study of one poet, one writer? They deserve our attention. That's the word I'm going to keep using. They deserve our attention. Our students deserve an opportunity to really dive into one person's poetry rather than just be hit with poems because they're easy, or they fit into lessons really easily because there's not a lot of text or whatever it is. They fit the theme and all those things that are just convenient uses for poems. Why don't we actually take these people seriously? It's my thought. Dive into their work, dive into the style of their writing, dive into the meaning behind it, make the connections between the poems, make the connections between the poets. But easier said than done. Anything you need from me, as always, all my information is listed below. This is a place for supporting one another, seeking those things, the practical and the powerful in teaching and learning. That's what we're all about. And happy teaching. What do I say at the end? Have fun. Let me know which one you picked out. Let me know who I missed in the comments below. Please. I gotta make another list now. I need 12 more. I'll see you next time.